Fake Boyfriend. Young Love, Book 1. Written by Suzana Thompson. Narrated by Paulina Schubert. Chapter 3. I didn't expect Gage to acknowledge me at school, but he stopped me in the hallway the next morning and introduced me to his friend. "Hey, Sarah, this asshole is Dylan." "New girl!" Dylan exclaimed. "How are you? Holy shit, you got this loser to talk to you? How'd you manage that?" My mouth opened even though I was at a loss for words, but Gage spoke first. "Sarah's my girlfriend." Dylan seemed to forget all about me as his gaze shot toward Gage in apparent shock and disbelief. It was nearly identical to the way Courtney had gaped at him yesterday, but he recovered faster and slid his gaze back to me as a slow grin spread over his face. "Well, I guess never say never. You must be a very special woman, Sarah. I'd be mad at this asshole for stealing you away from me, but it'll be good to see his grouchy ass smile. Be careful, though, because it might break his face." "Shut up, idiot," Gage told him, but I could tell that it was all friendly banter between them. "Sarah," someone called out sharply, and I looked to see Damon striding quickly toward us. "Are these guys bothering you?" "No," I answered, as my mood plummeted at the sight of him. He ignored my reply and looked at Gage and Dylan like they were trash. "Leave her alone or we'll go straight to the principal," he threatened in a condescending tone. "You leave me alone," I told him. "I want to talk to them." He snorted. "Seriously, Sarah? You are not that desperate. I told you not to listen to Courtney. She can't touch you if you're with me, so tell these losers to get lost." When he called them the names they had called each other, it was clearly derogatory and had my hackles raised on their behalf. "They are not losers. They are the first nice guys I've met in this whole school, so shut up." Dylan laughed. "You tell him, Sarah," he encouraged enthusiastically. Gage moved from his spot beside Dylan to come stand next to me. "You said something about Sarah being with you, but that's not happening," he said to Damon. "She's with me, so you better stay away from her." Damon shot me an incredulous look. "Tell me that's not true. Courtney was telling me some bullshit about this, but I can't believe you'd pick up this trailer trash over me." "Believe it, asshole," Gage retorted before I could respond. Putting his arm across my shoulders, he pulled me closer. I glanced up at him and saw him staring down Damon with a hard expression on his face. But everything except Gage faded into the background for me. My senses were completely caught up in him, the feel of his arm around me which was comforting and exciting at the same time. The intoxicating scent of him which I could savor better this close to him, and the appealing sight of his attractive face. When he turned to gaze at me with his alluring eyes, I got lost in them. "Sarah!" Damon yelled loudly. My gaze slowly drifted toward him, and I saw him glaring at me. "Damn," Dylan exclaimed. "I wish a girl would look at me like that." "You have your answer," Gage said. "Sarah is my girlfriend, so back off." Damon scowled at me. "This is your last chance. Walk away with me now, or I'll dump you for good." "Dude, why are you even trying?" Dylan asked. "You called her name 5 times before she even noticed. It's so obvious she's not into you." I flushed at the realization of how thoroughly caught up in staring at Gage I must have been if I hadn't even heard Damon calling my name repeatedly. Darting a glance toward Gage, I saw him watching me. I quickly turned my head and dropped my gaze to the floor as my blush deepened. "He'll dump you as soon as you give it up to him," Damon said, his voice tight with anger. "Don't come crying to me because I won't touch you after he has you. You're going to be really sorry, Sarah." When I looked up at him after his rant, he was already storming off. I settled back in relief into the security of the arm around me before I remembered my embarrassment. I stiffened, and Gage dropped his arm from my shoulders. "That him?" he asked, sounding just as angry as Damon had. "Yeah," I answered, feeling too awkward to look at him. "Is he stalking you?" Dylan questioned. "No," I replied. "Not really. He's just... I think he'll leave me alone now." I forced myself to glance at Gage. "Thanks." "Let me know if he bothers you again," he said, making it sound like a demand. Okay, I agreed, intimidated by his continuing agitation. He didn't appear to have noticed my embarrassing moment of infatuation with him, because he seemed aggravated. Maybe he was regretting the role he had agreed to play, but he had come through for me big time. We hadn't discussed anything about him putting on a show at school, but he had improvised perfectly and gotten Damon to finally give up. That thought made me beam happily at him. It worked! What worked? Dylan asked. Gage cut a look toward him. Could you give us a minute? Dylan smirked at him. Oh, alone time. I get it. Don't be nervous now. I know it's been a long time since you kissed a girl, but I think Sarah will understand that you're rusty. Shut the fuck up, Gage retorted as he glared at him. Dylan laughed in response and walked away, and I was left nervous and embarrassed all over again. When Gage looked at me, my gaze skittered away from his as my cheeks flamed. Don't let your guard down, he warned me. The unexpectedness of his words drew my eyes back to his face. The agitation still showed on his expression. I don't trust that guy, he added. Watch your back if he comes over to your house. I don't care what he said, he still wants you, and he's pissed that you don't want him. His concern for me was so unanticipated that I stared at him in wonder. A familiar fluttering started in my stomach, like it had every time I saw my crush at my old school, except this time it was accompanied by a warm feeling in my heart. Gage's gaze caught on mine, and he gave me a searching look before shifting his eyes away and clearing his throat. So, you'll stop over after school with... He let the question trail off, and it brought me back to the reason he was having anything to do with me at all. Money. He was only doing this for the money, and I had to remember that. I couldn't let myself become infatuated with him, because this was all pretend. Crushing on a guy from afar was safe and fun, since the distance kept me from getting overly attached to him. Developing an unrequited crush on Gage, though, could end up being painful when our inevitable parting came at the end of this business arrangement. Yeah, I replied. Okay, he said and walked away, reinforcing the fact that he had nothing else to say to me. Other people, however, suddenly wanted to talk to me. It seemed that news had spread fast that Gage had called me his girlfriend, and they wanted to know if it was true. I was glad that he had been the one to state that to people first before I had to confirm it, because I would have been wary of his reaction otherwise. Yes, I was paying him to pretend to be my boyfriend, but I hadn't imagined extending that to school in plain sight of all our classmates. Recalling his arm around me in the hallway, I realized that other people besides Dylan and Damon had seen us and heard us. Someone asked me if Gage and Damon had really gotten in a fight over me. They just argued, I clarified. They're both so hot, another girl gushed. What made you choose Gage? I guess you're into bad boys. He's not really. Why would he choose you? A girl who had been giving me dirty looks while the other girls questioned me excitedly interjected in a bitchy tone. You're not even that pretty, but I guess he's used to getting it from groupies. He'll do anything. Groupies? I asked before my brain could catch up with the rest of her comment. You don't know he's in a band? The previously gushing girl inquired incredulously. You have got to see him sing. He is so hot. Scorching, one of the other girls agreed. He is like pure sex. But I guess you already know that, she added enviously. My brain was still reeling from the revelation that Gage was a singer in a band. He was so unapproachable and intimidating that I couldn't imagine it. I tried to picture him performing to an audience and failed. I could sooner see his friend, Dylan, engaging a crowd of people. He had natural charm and smiled a lot more than Gage. He could definitely be an entertainer, whereas Gage... Well, Gage was hot, as the girls had said. He certainly had the looks to front a band, but I wasn't so sure if he had the charisma. Maybe all it took was the brooding bad boy thing. I wondered what his singing voice sounded like, and if he had any talent. The bell startled me, and I dashed past the girls and out into the hallway. I had only meant to make a quick stop in the restroom, but they had gathered around me as I was washing my hands, and started questioning me about Gage. Now I was late to class, and I hated being late. I just liked drawing attention to myself and having everyone's eyes on me as I walked into class, and interrupted the teacher. She gave me a disapproving look, but didn't reprimand me, and she continued her lecture as I took my seat. My second day of school was better than the first, although just as many people stared at me. A lot of the looks I got from girls were more curious than nasty and disdainful. The buzz around me was more excited than derisive, and the difference was my connection to Gage. He apparently hadn't dated anyone from this school before, and that gave me a special status. Some girls glared daggers of jealousy at me, but that was better than being looked at like trash. Many guys still ogled me like I was a piece of meat, but none of them approached me. I didn't know if it was because word had spread that I had rejected all sexual advances yesterday, or if it was because they were afraid of Gage. Either way, I was glad to be left alone. I had prepared for lunch today by bringing a granola bar with me, and I ate it in the hallway as other students headed to the cafeteria. Stopping at the water fountain, I drank my fill before seeking sanctuary in the library. The peaceful atmosphere settled over me, and I relaxed as I browsed the stacks for a book to read. I picked out a teen romance that looked light and fun. These were the kinds of books I read by the dozens as I imagined being the girl in the story and experiencing my first date and first kiss. This time, though, instead of getting lost in the fictional world of the book, my mind drifted into the fantasy of kissing Gage. My memory replayed that moment in the hallway when our gazes had been locked, and I imagined him leaning down to bring his lips close to mine. I recalled the feeling of his arm around me, and I could almost feel it again as I pictured his lips connecting with mine in a movie-style kiss. Heat flared in my cheeks when I realized where my thoughts were at. I couldn't allow myself to think about Gage that way. Pretending that he was my boyfriend was awkward enough already without having a crush on him. If I started wishing it to be true, then I would be even more nervous around him. He might figure out that I liked him for real. I cringed at the thought of how mortifying that would be. That girl in the bathroom had been right when she questioned why he would choose me. The truth was that he never would. I needed to remember that, and stay focused on getting through this without losing sight of what I was doing. Our ruse had been a success so far. Only one day into it, and Gage had driven away Damon from me. Courtney also hadn't done anything else against me, so I seemed to have appeased her. Hiring Gage had already paid off for me, and I went straight to the bank after school to get him the rest of the money I had promised him. I had misgivings, though, when I arrived at his apartment building. Once I gave him the money, he would have no motivation to keep helping me. I trusted him more than I did yesterday, but I still hardly knew him. He seemed like a decent guy, and had held up his end of the bargain and even done more than I had asked him to, going so far as to tell Dylan that I was his girlfriend. I was grateful that he was keeping this a secret just between us. I didn't want anyone to know that I had to resort to paying a guy to be my boyfriend. Fake boyfriend, I reminded myself. Sitting in my car, thinking about what to do, I was startled by a sudden rapping on the passenger window. Turning my head in that direction, I saw Gage standing there. I opened my door to get out of the car, but that disengaged the rest of the locks, and Gage got in. "Did you bring it?" he asked as he sat down in the passenger seat. "Yes," I answered, and then silently chided myself for not thinking of lying. "Good. Then could you give me a ride to my bank again? I need to go into work earlier today." "Okay," I agreed reluctantly. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing," I replied, not wanting to tell him that I was unsure about giving him the money. "Did he bother you again?" he demanded in a sharp tone. "No," I said, bringing my gaze back to his face and seeing an angry scowl. "Everything's fine," I assured him. "It worked perfectly." "Then what is it?" he questioned with a penetrating gaze that I couldn't hide from. I looked away. "Nothing," I repeated and pulled my door shut before turning the key in the ignition to start the car. "Sarah," he said, placing his hand on my arm. "Tell me." My awareness narrowed to the skin he was touching, and I blurted out the truth in some kind of desperate attempt to drown out the sensation. "I'm worried about giving you the money." He removed his hand. "Oh, yeah, I understand." I looked at him. His expression was neutral now, but I felt bad. He didn't seem to be taking offense, but I felt like I had slighted him. I recalled the way Damon had looked down on him and called him trailer trash. He didn't live in a trailer, but it shouldn't have mattered to anyone where he lived. It didn't make them better than him. I took a breath. What you did today at school, how you just acted like you were my boyfriend right there in front of everyone, that was great. And it helped so much. Thank you. He gave me a quizzical look. Isn't that what you hired me to do? Yeah, but I thought that would just be on the weekends. I didn't think you'd want to associate with me at school. Something flickered in his eyes, and he looked at me in a way that made me nervous. You think I wouldn't want to associate with you? I shrugged and looked away. I'm not cool or anything. But anyway, I said I'd give you the money, so I will. Shifting into drive, I pulled out of the parking space and drove toward the street. You don't have to, he told me. I'll wait until the job is finished, like I agreed to. No, I replied. I'm not going back on what I said. I promised to bring it to you today. You can go ahead and put it in the bank. I'll get my car to the shop tomorrow. I promise you can trust me, Sarah. I know anyone can say that, but all I can do is prove it to you. You'll see at school tomorrow, so try not to worry all night. I smiled ruefully at his accurate assessment of what I was likely to do. I had no proof that I had hired him to pretend to be my boyfriend, and I would now be relying on him to keep his word to me. It was a huge and very stupid risk, considering that I only had him for a day. This was by far the craziest thing I had ever done. In fact, it was only the second craziest thing I'd ever done. The first was hiring him in the first place. Until yesterday, I had been the person who always played it safe. Where were you during lunch? Gage asked. I looked for you so you could sit with me, but I didn't see you in the cafeteria. I glanced at him in surprise. You want me to sit with you at lunch? It's what couples do, right? Yeah, I replied. So where were you? In the library, I answered. You rebel, he teased. Off getting into trouble in the library. I glanced at him with a smile, enjoying his unexpected lightheartedness. I hadn't known he was capable of it, and it was a nice surprise. He was smiling, too, and it was wonderful to see. My mood soared with a carefree feeling I hadn't felt since my life had been happy and simple back with my best friend in my hometown. Emily and I used to have so much fun, I told him. I don't even think I realized how much until now. But even just hanging out, it was so easy. No worries, no drama, just enjoying being together, even if we were just cruising around like this. Who is Emily? He inquired. She's my best friend back home. We still talk every day, but it's not the same as talking in person. She doesn't get some things because they're out of context for her. She hasn't been here to pick up on the mood of things, so it's hard to explain to her. Like, she thought it was hilarious that I saw Damon's... I trailed off as I remembered that I was talking to a guy, and there was no way I could say that word in front of him. My face flamed in embarrassment as I realized that the conclusion to that sentence was obvious, and Gage knew exactly what I had seen. He didn't sound at all amused when he spoke, though. He flashed you? No, he was already naked when I walked out there. I was going to go into the pool, I explained. But I didn't know that they were out there in the hot tub, and then he came out to talk to me. I shuddered at the memory. He scared you, Gage stated. What did he do? Nothing, I replied as I pulled into the parking lot of his bank. He just said things. What things? He demanded as I parked the car. I shook my head. I can't repeat what he said. Wanting to drop the subject, I grabbed my purse from the center console and pulled out the envelope of money. Here, I thrust it at him. He took it and stared at it in his hands. I'll pay you back. What? I questioned. His gaze came up to meet mine. It'll take time, probably a long time, but I promise to pay you back every cent. What are you talking about? I asked in bewilderment. You don't need to pay back that money. You're earning it. His blue eyes blazed at me. You shouldn't have to pay me to keep that asshole away from you. I need that money to fix my car, though, so this will be a loan. I will pay it back. With that declaration, he got out of the car and strode into the bank. I sat there with my stomach fluttering with excitement and the stirrings of infatuation. My heart was filled with warmth and admiration for Gage, and I knew that trying to prevent myself from developing a crush on him would be futile. It was already happening. And he had just taken it from mere physical attraction to affecting my emotions as well. I was too besotted with him at the moment to think about how much trouble that spelled for me.